the calendar. We do have class tomorrow. I don't think I'm going to get through everything today that we need to get through because I keep forgetting to do the syllabus with this class. So I need to do that today, and then also, oh, those of you who are just coming missed the show. You missed all the music. So I'm going to do the syllabus today. You know, most of the stuff on the syllabus you already know from the website, but I do need to officially go over it. And then we'll talk about the Partner's Tale, which is a pretty morbid one. A pretty morbid one. I want to talk a little bit about the discussions. Here, let me put my AirPods on. I think I get a better quality. Okay. And then we'll go over the study guide if there's any questions that you have for me. That might move until tomorrow, I don't know. But also we have discussion number 2. So I want to talk about the discussion number 1 a little bit. Those of you that are wrapping up your discussion number 2 for tomorrow, might give you some tips on that. So I'm going to head over to good old Blackboard. Let me put the chat in range here. Salem's cat is just like staring at me in my lesson. It's like he's not impressed. Is that your cat or just a picture of some cat?
It's just some picture, but it looks like my cat.
Oh, you have a yellow cat, an orange tabby cat. Okay, so I'm going to do the syllabus first up, and then we'll look at the Partner's Tale. Also, the material for the next unit is up. I'll show that to you as well. On the main page here is where you will find the syllabus. I know this is not exciting and you can read a syllabus yourself, but I'm required to go through it with you. So here it is. I will just talk about some of these sections. I'm not going to read it to you, but I already went over the course description on the first day when I had most of the material for the syllabus on that website. So it's just that they didn't have the interface that we use to make the syllabus at STC ready on that date, but it's the same material. So this is a survey course. That means that we're going very quickly through things, not a lot of depth, but we're trying to cover a lot of ground in a superficial way. Normally when I teach Canterbury Tales, it takes me a month or so because we read 6 or 7 of the tales to get a good variety, but this is a course where we just sort of like skip across the top of literature so that we can get through from, you know, Anglo-Saxon times to modern times. Students will study works of prose, poetry, drama, and fiction. That's all going to happen. And then historical, linguistic, and cultural context. So that's why we throw in the history reading. That's why we talk about the influences of the time period on the literature. And you'll be expected to keep in mind the qualities of literature at different points in time in history. So you should be able to look at a poem and say whether it's from the medieval time period, whether it's Anglo-Saxon, whether it's Romantic or Victorian, or, you know, what have you, based on the influences of that work. Here's my contact information. It's the same stuff that's on the main page here in Blackboard and also in the Google Classroom. Here are the learning outcomes. These are the learning outcomes for the English department. You have to be able to give main ideas and explain how devices are used in texts, use standard English properly, integrate source material, attribute source material, and identify cultural and historical movements. These are the outcomes for this particular course. It's about learning who are the major authors of the different literary time periods, how do those time periods change the perspectives of the people of the time in different periods or regions. Looking at literary works as an expression of the political, social, cultural climate, demonstrating knowledge of the development of the language. So how does English look as it shifts through time, right? How is the language evolving? Articulate aesthetic principles that guide the scope and variety of the works, and write research-based papers. There's the textbook. I think the one that we have online, the PDF is version 8. So if you're using that one, if you don't have the actual textbook, which I already told you, I'm not officially saying this, but you don't really need the textbook, but you can go to school. You can go to school and get the textbook. It looks like this. I don't know, carrying it around might make you feel, super literary because it's a chunky book. The only thing that I've seen so far that's going to affect class by using the PDF is that Othello is not in the PDF. They have Lear and Hamlet in the PDF, and we're going to read Othello, which is in the 9th version of the textbook, but I did find a PDF online that we can use instead. So we won't be using that same PDF, we'll just be using a different PDF when we get to Othello in the next unit. Here's an outline of all of the time periods and what we're going to be reading in all those time periods. So if you wanted a little preview, I made the calendar because this list of dates over here, I'm more visual than that. So I need to see, okay, that's 2 weeks away, or that's this Friday or whatever. Like just telling me that it's 2/1/21 doesn't help me visualize that that's next week. That's next Monday. So the due dates are all listed there for the different units. You can kind of preview what we'll be reading in each one of them here. Here are the campus policies about non-discrimination and where you can go if you feel that you're being discriminated against in any way. If you're pregnant or parenting, there are some support systems through the college for you, so you can use that information. If you have a disability and you need accommodations for that disability, then you can contact the ADA office and they will help you with their services. If you're a veteran, likewise. This is not a developmental studies class. That's what they used to call them remedial classes, but now I guess that's not politically correct. So they call them developmental courses, but those are the ones that you take before you take the actual classes if you didn't qualify for them and they don't count for credit. This is about what's going to happen in a crisis. Here's a student handbook link, so in case you need to look something up there. The COVID-19 statement. I can tell you that at the departmental meeting that we had, or the faculty meeting that we had last Saturday, they were talking about continuing with distance learning through the summer. There may be a couple of courses that meet face-to-face, and then they're thinking about doing about 50-50 in the fall. So if you are continuing with STC, if you're graduating and continuing with STC, that's good to know. Or if you're a junior and you're taking dual next fall, they're kind of 50-50 on those. Obviously, for the instructors that are WISD employees, that's going to depend more on what WISD is doing, but you can always check and see where they are with their COVID-19 statements. Okay, so then this is the part that I put in. There's the heading for your papers. I think everybody knows how to do that from first semester. Here's my statement about communication. It's always good to stay in communication with me just so that I know what's going on, if there are any issues. If there's a problem, communicate with me. I'm pretty flexible on things if I know ahead of time. It's easier to be flexible ahead of time than it is to be after the fact. So it's always, good to just drop me a note and say, oh, I've got this family emergency, you know, can I have an extra day to do my discussion or, my paper, whatever. Communication is good. Electronic devices, that's more for face-to-face class. I just think it's rude to be scrolling scrolling while you're in class. Attendance, I think you already know that if you're not here in the virtual class, then the expectation is that you will watch the video that I post of class so that you can be up to speed with everybody else, and B, that you will do the formative for that day so I can give you East credit. The formative is always, what questions do you have about the readings? Because I worry that if somebody's not in class, that they didn't have an opportunity to ask me something or hear me talk about, the material. And I want to make sure that if they have any issues or questions, that they have a forum to present that. I do respond to those the same day, well, the next day. So those responses are in formative itself. So if you do end up having to do the formative because of attendance, go back the next day because I will write in the answer to your question and you'll see it there on formative. There's a little bell on formative that has a red notification number, and you'll see that I responded. Grading policies, obviously things that are late, if you don't clear them with me, are 10 points off. Like, it's basically a reduction of a letter grade per day. You can avoid that if you contact me, I mean, maybe once or twice in a term. I'm not talking about every assignment, but if something comes up, you got slammed with a lot of work, I'm gonna try to be understanding about that, but let me know ahead of time and you can avoid that 10-point penalty. You should be checking your current grades. Always be looking. Sometimes, I'm meant to type 100 and I typed a 10. That's going to affect your grade. So make sure that you're kind of double checking the grades. This term, all of the grades will be the same between East and STC, but the averages might be different. And that's because of the grade breakdown. The way that East likes, WISD likes to do it is the 60-40. STC, they already came up with the breakdown for this course. So it's already in this manner. So it'll be the same assignments, but how they weigh differs depending on the different schools. Just a reminder, same as first semester, I do have a revision policy. If you write something and you want to revise it for a better grade, like the papers, say you get your paper back and you missed the mark or whatever, then you can always come and talk to me. We'll have a little writing conference and I'll give you the opportunity to rework that essay and you can improve your grade. Here is the plagiarism statement for the English department. I think everybody knows that you need to do your own work, and there are some pretty severe penalties for not doing that. That also takes, I just want to mention, that also works for people who lend their work to other people. Don't assume that it's only plagiarism if you're taking. It's also plagiarism if you're giving. So, sometimes I run into issues where two students are being removed from class because they basically submitted the same thing. And student number 2 asked student number 1, hey, can I see your assignment? Or can I see your discussion that you're posting? Or what are you doing for your paper? And unbeknownst to student 1 who shared that, that person just basically copied your work and submitted it. So you have to be careful. I think it's fine to work together. I think it's fine to have study partners and share ideas, but your ideas that you present in class and for your assignments have to be your own. Chain of command, if there's an issue with class that you're supposed to do is come and talk to me about it. And then if for some reason I don't help you resolve that problem, or it doesn't really happen to me that, I don't really have those issues. I'm pretty easygoing, but in case something happens and it's not resolved, this is the English department chair over at STC. So you can contact him. All right, any questions on the syllabus, where to find it, what's in it? Anything like that? Okay, I tried to do that quickly. I know it's kind of the most boring thing, but there is something on the evaluation. Did this instructor go over the syllabus with you? So I don't want to get a bad mark on that. I don't want to get marked down for that. Okay, let's get into the material for today. I do want to mention that Unit 2 is up. This is the entire unit, and if you look on the calendar, this takes us all the way to the third week in February. So you'll see that I added some things to the calendar, like the study guides for each one of these days. So what I'll do is I'll go over the material briefly, and then we'll look at the study guide, and I'll say, which ones do you want me to talk about for your notes, et cetera, et cetera. So this next unit goes all the way until the 18th of February. You can open it and check it out if you want to. I'm not going to go through it officially until next week because Tuesday starts the beginning of the 16th and 17th centuries, Unit 2. I will tell you that the readings are here. So it should look just like the first one, except with the next unit material. I feel like it's good to be consistent with the way things are structured. So it's the same structure here. You can already look at the readings. We have some poems for next Tuesday. We're going to start off with poetry and then work our way into Shakespearean sonnets, and then we'll read a Shakespearean drama. But that's there for you to start perusing and preparing for next week. But we're going to spend some time finishing up with the Middle Ages today and tomorrow. Okay, before we talk about the Pardoner's Tale, the Pardoner is another very colorful character in the Canterbury Tales. And I do have a slideshow to go through a lot like I did with The Wife of Bath. I feel like that's more effective than sliding through the text. Sometimes if it's a shorter text, it's not a problem, but there are just multiple pages. So it's easier for me to just do like a overview on a slideshow. But I do want to talk about last week's discussions before we get into that. The discussions that we turned in, they looked really very good for the most part. There were some people that just didn't follow directions, and I don't really feel bad for that, to be honest with you. I feel like I went through on multiple occasions everything that needed to be done for those discussions, and the links were there and so on. But I did, as I was reading them, I'm not finished grading them yet. I should finish up today or tomorrow. Maybe Saturday, because that's a lot to read if everybody wrote, how much you had to write, and I've got 40 students, so I'm reading through them all and making comments. But I do want to point out that as I was reading them, I'm going to go to other materials here, and it will be in other materials throughout. So originally there was good, fair, and poor were the determining factors. And I think there's something better than good. And I feel as I was reading them and scoring them and commenting on them, I started to think, you know what? I bet that the students would like to know the difference between like good and excellent. Like, what's the difference between an 85 and 100? Because there is a difference. An 85 to me is a good grade, but it's not as good as you can get. And I'm sure that there are some students that are motivated to do as well as possible. So I wanted to make a little bit of a guideline for the top of the line. So, I wanted to make another category, and I know that I didn't talk to you about that ahead of time, but I did make a rubric that you can refer to as you're working on your second post. So, which is due tomorrow. So here, let me make one more space right there. Okay. So I just felt like it was easier when I was grading to look at this chart, so I'm going to share it with you. This is all the same information that was on the website. I just put it into a chart so that it's kind of easy to navigate. These are all the same things that were on the website in kind of paragraph format. But they didn't allow for excellent. There's sort of a range from 85 to 100. So I did read some excellent responses and some people that were very thoughtful and insightful about their response. And I could tell that crafting it took a lot of thought, preparation, and development. So I feel like there should be a category for those top, 5 points, those people that are in that range of excellent. So what I did was I took what they originally had for the course here, and I just extended it so that you'll know what is making the top of the line score, because there were several people that ended up in that category. So the excellent is sort of listed here, and you can read through that when as you're preparing for the second discussion tomorrow. But you can see that it's just sort of like a little nudge ahead in terms of meaningful contribution, proof of reading. There's no doubt at all that you can manipulate the material because you understand it. You can work through ideas in a way that makes it clear to me that you understood the material. There are people who might have understood the material, but they didn't express it well, so it ended up down here. But you can see that these are the requirements for that. And I'm hoping that you appreciate that, because I know good is kind of like, I don't know. They do the same thing with my evaluation, by the way, at STC. At STC, you're either good, fair, or poor, or actually it's good, acceptable with corrections, and not acceptable or something. And I'm like, maybe I'd like to shoot for better than good sometimes. I don't know. So this rubric, you can find it in other materials. I'll put it in each unit at the bottom under other materials. And I just think that's maybe a more logical way to think about how they're being scored. I am looking at 4 things for your grade. I'm looking at your original post, and for me, in my mind, that's about 50% or 60% of the overall score. And then the other 3 are the 3 responses that you're doing, the replies to your classmates. So, that's the other 40% or so in my mind, but it's only 1 grade. So it is possible to do an excellent post and then have sort of a mediocre response to other people. I noticed that was happening the most when people weren't really engaging with Beowulf and Gawain. They were just engaging with the post. What I mean by that is there were people who in their replies just said, "Good job, I like your idea. Maybe you could give more examples. That's a good quote." And that's just engaging with what the person did, not what the person said. And it's important in your replies that you're having sort of a dialogue with your classmates about the concepts in the literature. So when you're doing those replies on the next one, kind of give a thought to, am I just engaging with the person, what the person wrote, or am I engaging with the ideas that they presented and having a discussion about literature? Because that's what you should be doing. So there's a point down here on the replies that talks about that. So if that happens, it's just limited to commentary on the style of the response and not engaging in literary discussion. That's going to be in the poor group down here, because that's easy to write that. You could write that on 3 different people, like saying, "Good job, I liked it." It's not really engaging with the topic. So anyway, I'm hoping that rubric is helpful for you. I think that's it from Blackboard. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, I want to talk about the partner then. I have the chat open here, so if there's anything that comes up that you have a question about, you can pop it in the chat and I will respond. The partner is another well-drawn character, because the reason I say that is because there are some characters that aren't very well drawn in the Canterbury Tales, and they're not as detailed or as round as the characters that we're looking at, the wife of Bath from last time and the partner from this time. And there are people from all walks of life. I mean, there's the miller who basically swears and tells us that he rips off his clients, and he tells a really, really dirty story. And so, you know, that's just how people are. They don't have us reading that one, but it is in your text. You could read the Miller if you want to. Anyway, so the partner, let me go through first the description of what a partner is, because we don't really have this job anymore. Many of the pilgrims, because they're described by their job in the general prologue, and that's kind of like their name in the story, their jobs are no longer exist, because we're just as a society past that. Some of them we do have, but some of them we don't. And we don't have a partner anymore. A partner, and if you read the little bit in the text before the partner's tale, it explains this. A partner was a monk or a priest who went out into the countryside and tried to make money for the church. The church, after the Crusades and during the Crusades, was just hemorrhaging funds. They couldn't support all of the things that they were used to paying for, and so the church needed to make money. And one of the things that they did was they offered up, basically, for your contribution, a papal indulgence. And maybe you've studied this like in world history or something like that, European history. A papal indulgence is basically a paper, and I put a picture of one here. It's basically a paper that is official from the Catholic Church in Rome that says that you're allowed to go to heaven, basically. You're excused from your sins. Now, on the church's side, that seemed like a good thing to do. I mean, we can make money because everybody has some little sin in their closet that they've done. So most people, if they had the money, would want to buy one of these pardons. But then it sort of gives a license to people to do bad things. So, like, if I know that I purchased a papal indulgence and it's there in my top drawer, I can be thinking to myself, well, I can do whatever I want in this life because I've got this, get out of jail free card. And so it kind of backfired in some ways, because the church didn't think about how that would give license to people to have poor behavior and sin. But the idea is that you purchase this document, and you get to heaven and you turn it in like a ticket, and your sins get erased and you get to go into the warm embrace of the Creator. That's not legit. I mean, let's just think about, we don't really know about the afterlife, but how are you gonna get that paper after you die, and so on and so forth? So it's just sort of like one of those things, somebody walks up to you in a parking lot, hey, do you want to buy a papal indulgence? I don't know. So it's not really a legit thing, but it made people feel comfortable that they were going to be going to heaven. And the church, it's a little bit of a scam. The church used it to pay for and fund the Crusades, among other things, like the creation of the Vatican and so on. So the partner's the guy that goes around. He goes to Rome and he picks these up. And the partner in this tale, they talk about how he's just come from Rome. He's got a whole bunch of fresh pardons in his bag that he's ready to peddle to people. Just like I did with the Wife of Bath, I made some notes on the general prologue portrait so that you don't have to go back and read that. But the partner is, it says, good and gentle, and he's traveling with the summoner. The summoner's description or portrait comes right before this one. They're kind of, like a duo. The summoner's job is to go and get people when they're called to ecclesiastical court. Ecclesiastical court is when you do something that is sinful, you can be brought before the church, just like you would be brought into court for a civil crime, and you can be tried. So, if you end up committing adultery, then they can haul you into ecclesiastical court, and the summoner would be the one who would go out and summon you and take you to court. So they're talking about the two of them are traveling together, and they just came from Rome. The partner has this yellow waxy hair, and Chaucer takes a while to describe it. It's very lank, like it's not poofy, it's very greasy and kind of like hangs in strands and then just sort of flows over his shoulders, it says. It over his shoulders overspread, you can see right here. It was thin and like sort of piecey one by one. He doesn't always wear his hood, it says in the general prologue, which means that he's not always easily identifiable as a partner. So you can't just look at him always and tell that that's his job. Here it talks about how in his wallet or in his bag, he had some fresh pardons from Rome. I already talked about that. He has a very high-pitched voice. And this is where the narrator, Chaucer, gets a little bit, politically incorrect for 2021. And he says his voice was very high-pitched. His face was smooth, like he didn't have any whiskers or anything like that. And so I think he might have been a gelding or a mare. And that is a metaphor comparing the pardoner to either a gelding, which is a horse that's been castrated, or a mare, which is a female horse. So basically, he's calling the masculinity of the pardoner into question. I don't think you should do that today. He has a lot of side hustles. I put side hustles in quotation marks because that's what we would call it today. But basically, in addition to these pardons, he's branched out. And he's got like this mitten that he says was, if you put your hand in it, then magical things will happen to you from God. He's got some bones in a jar that he says are the bones of a saint, and you can pay a little bit of money to look at them and touch them and feel blessed. He's got a pillowcase that he swears is the shroud of the Virgin Mary, and if you touch it, then your life will be blessed. But it's all fake stuff, and he says right to them that it's all fake, and which is kind of funny because at the end of his tale, he tries to make money off of these pilgrims. But he says right here, in a glass, he had these pig bones and he had all these little trinkets that he would say were blessed or were special in some religious way, but they're just bones from his lunch that he put in there. He talks about they talk about here in his portrait that he makes a lot of money in a day. He makes more money in a day than other partners make in a month, and it's probably because of those side hustles. He says he made the people his apes, meaning he made fools out of them, basically, because they're so in awe of what he says he's showing them that he uses their religious conviction against them, and so he takes their money. And if you're a true believer and you really think that one of the apostles' bones are in this container, then you would look at it and feel the presence of an important element of the church. And he uses that to his advantage to make money, because to touch it or to see it, you would have to pay. So that is not exactly legit. And he is somewhat corrupt. And he talks about how much money he can make. He can even make money from, he's so good at convincing people with his cons that he can even convince like an old woman that doesn't have any, to give him her shoes that she's wearing. Which, why would you want to do that if you were a man of God, right? These are the coordinating pages in the PDF if you wanted to look at it. Okay, a few main points about the Pardoner's prologue. It's much shorter than the Wife of Bath, so hopefully when you were reading, you were happy to see that. The Wife of Bath is the longest prologue, but the Pardoner in his prologue, before he even starts his tale, he talks openly about how he does all of his preaching. And the whole purpose of his preaching is to get money. How can he get money? He can make people feel guilty. So the whole thing is a guilt trip. And he even says it to them before he even tells the tale. And then he tells the tale that he uses to make all this money from these people. So he references this Latin term, radi malorum est cubiditas. Sorry, it's been a while. I had to take a Latin class in high school, but I don't think that was the best pronunciation. And it means greed is the root of all evil. So the partners concept is that if you preach about the evils of greed, then you will make everybody feel guilty because everybody has been greedy about something. If it's not money, then it's time. We feel bad that we took up somebody's time, or we feel bad that we wasted our time, or we feel bad that we wanted something and coveted something that wasn't ours. He knows that all of the other sins are all dependent on greed. So he wants to preach to that because then he can affect the greatest number of people in his audience, and then he can make the most money. If I just preach on infidelity and say, oh, if you're cheating on your spouse, that's horrible, then all the people who haven't done that go, oh, I'm good. I don't need to buy your indulgence. I don't need to give you any money to make myself feel better. So he preaches to greed, and he says that's the most effective because greed is at the bottom of all of the sins. I should have put a little block in here with the different sins, the 7 deadly sins. Do y'all know them? Well, there's greed, but there's also um, sloth, which is, people think that sloth is laziness in general, but it's not. Sloth in the medieval sense is laziness in your religious life. So you would feel greedy about taking the time for yourself and not giving your time or your money to God. What else? Lust. Oh, I should have put a graphic in there because they're not all going to come to me in my mind right now. But maybe you know them. I don't know. There's a link on the study guide to them. So maybe when we get to the study guide, we can talk about that. But he's trying to be the most efficient at making money out of it. He explains all of his tools of deception. He doesn't keep it a secret, which is really kind of shocking because at the end, he's going to try to make money from these pilgrims. They don't like it, but he tells them up front that he's got these pig bones in this pillowcase that he fools people into thinking are religious relics. Also in the prologue, I already said that. He preaches about greed because it covers all of his bases. Everybody feels guilty about being greedy about something or another. He also says that he wants to make all this money so that he can live a nice life. Well, if you're a partner, the expectation is, you're a priest, you're a monk. The expectation when people give money to you is that it's going to the church. But he talks about how he doesn't want to live like a beggar. Well, he is a beggar for the church. And besides that, when you take on a life in service to God, you even still take a vow of poverty. In other words, I'm not spending my life making money for myself, I'm spending my life in service of God. So the fact that he keeps money so that he can live a nice life, he talks about he wants to eat, good food, and he doesn't want to live like a beggar, is kind of counter to his vows in the church. And this is something that happens a lot in the Canterbury Tales. And I'll talk about it toward the end after we watch the video of the partners' tale and all that stuff. But Chaucer is trying to make a point about corruption in the church, and the partner is an example of that. So any questions on the prologue? Those are the main things. All right, the partner's tale is pretty short too, and pretty straightforward. Let me go through it with you, and then we can watch the animated version. I don't know if you enjoyed that last time, but it's fun to watch a video representation of something that you've read. So here's the tale. It starts with these 3 guys who are revelers. That means that they're indulging in sins of the flesh. They're at a establishment that is less than legitimate, and there's gambling and whoring and all kinds of stuff going on there. And this is the time of the plague, so as they are partying it up, they see a funeral procession go by, and they're drunk, so they start yelling at death and death. Why are you always around everywhere? And they, basically say, we're going to go kill death. Death needs to die. Um, and so these young guys set out to go and find death, capital D, right? Like the embodiment of death, the Grim Reaper type character. And they do find it. And then where do they find it? Through greed. And so that's part of the partner's message. So in the plot, in the rising action, what happens is they drunkenly stumble around, Death, where are you, Death? And they call out to Death, but they only find this really old man. And they ask him, do you know where Death is? And the old man sort of like points in that general direction, and they start walking that way. They don't find Death immediately. Instead, they find treasure. And so they get super excited. This treasure's just sitting here. We can take it. Oh, but it's daylight. We should wait until night where we can take it and just keep it for ourselves. And so they get super excited about having all this money. But they know that they have to stay there and kind of guard it as their found treasure until the night when they can move it and take it for their own. So they're hanging out there with the treasure, and they, start to get hungry. We need something to drink. And so they send the youngest one into town to go and get some provisions so that they can make it through the day while they're staking out this claim. Kind of like the dragon in Beowulf, right? Anyway, so the two that are left behind while the young one goes into town, they start saying, why do we have to split this three ways? When that guy comes back, we'll just kill him, and then we can each have half of this instead of a third. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. So they plot against the guy who went to go get the food for them. Meanwhile, that guy goes into town to get the food and supplies, and he gets it, but he also thinks, why do I have to share this with those two guys? I'll just poison them with this stuff, and I can take it all for myself later today. So like you can see all the sins kind of like piling up, right, in this story. And so he gets some poison and he puts it into the wine or whatever, and he goes back to join them at the place, where the treasure is. So he comes back and he's got the provisions, he puts them down, and those two guys jump him and kill him. And they celebrate by eating and drinking the materials that the other one brought back. So they all three end up dead. The other two get poisoned. And so there they are, their dead bodies on top of the coins. And it's all very symbolic, right? Because they went looking for death and they found it, and they're laying on top of it. And the reason that they died was because of their greed. I mean, it's better to have a third of a treasure than to be dead. So the lesson is about greed, just as the pardoner said. Also, maybe don't go out looking for death. Death's gonna find you soon enough. So yeah, they go out finding death, and they definitely find him. So the following action, really, it just kind of ends right there. And the lesson is nobody gets the gold, and they sought death and found him through their greed. I don't know. I always say whatever it is on the list before I get to it in the slideshow. So you can see how this is a very effective tool for the partner to try to make money from the pilgrims or anybody he runs into. He tells this tale. So when he's done, I want to add, it's not part of the plot of the story, but after he's done, there's this little epilogue where after he tells the story, he starts going into his spiel, his sales pitch, and he starts telling the pilgrims, hey, so who wants to buy this indulgence, or how greedy do you feel? And he starts really putting on the emotional pressure for these pilgrims to give him some money. And it makes them angry and uncomfortable. And the host, especially, the host is a character. He owns the Tabard Inn. And when he sees this group of pilgrims, he decides to go with them on this little trip. So he's kind of like the, you know, travel agent slash, like, I don't know, he's sort of the, what's the word I'm thinking of? The guide. Yeah. And he gets really mad because he doesn't want people to be taken advantage of. And the partner kind of pushes because it's in his nature, it's just what he does. And so he just goes right into his spiel to try to make money. And so a lot of the other pilgrims are sour at the partner after his tale. I mean, the tale goes into some detail, so you should make sure that you read that so that you can quote it properly in your discussion. But any questions? All right, so the significance of the partner's tale. I already alluded to the fact that the Canterbury Tales and Chaucer, who's writing them, is very critical of the greed and corruption of the Catholic Church at the time. The Catholic Church made a lot of changes throughout history, but at the time it was quite corrupt. And so all of the characters who are members of the church, the nuns, the priests, the monks, the pardoners, the summoners, all of them are, pretty much not what you would expect a priest or a nun to be like. Part of the reason for that is that they came from wealthy families, likely, but didn't want to get married. So what happened was if they didn't want to get married or take on this state of their family or whatever, they were the youngest of five and their older siblings are going to be the new duke of whatever, then they went into the service of the church because it was the only option other than that, really. And so they were used to a certain lifestyle, and rather than serving God, they were really just sort of hiding out. So there's a list here. There are other characters in the Canterbury Tales, other pilgrims that are corrupt, and Chaucer is using them to make a point about how the Catholic Church needs reforms. And this is right about the time of Martin Luther, right? So the Reformation comes up in history where Europe is trying to reconcile the church and what it says and what it does are in two different realms. So there's this unification attempt, and ultimately the church separates, and the Anglican Church takes over in England, and the official religion of the country changes from Catholic to Protestant, and specifically the Anglican Church. This note also says there is a parson who is not part of the Catholic Church. He's a Protestant. That's where the Martin Luther part comes in, and he's the most giving, wonderful, helpful, humble servant of God. So Chaucer's trying to do a foil character type thing by saying, all these characters that are associated with the Catholic Church are corrupt and greedy, and this one parson is not, but he's a Protestant. So it's sort of like him emphasizing that the Protestant Church is more legitimate. So there's a date here. I don't think you need to know that date, but just so that you can know that we're in the same time frame, this is where the Anglican Church is formed. And so the whole country, the king, well, for many years this was a debate, but the king changes the official religion. People are upset about that. You can't just like take away people's religion. So there's a lot of back and forth before the country officially turns Protestant. Okay. I will play now for you the animated version of The Pardoner's Tale. It's kind of cool. I know this is an older video, I know it's not the most modern thing, but it's not like Hollywood's making versions of the Canterbury Tales every year either. So this version, I like it because what they did was they went to artists and they said, okay, we're going to put together this whole compilation of the Canterbury Tales. And they went to claymation artists and illustrators. And there's like a different style for each tale. Like some of them are in claymation, which is that stop action. This one is. There are others that have a more like sort of dreamy illustration. And so I just like that version, even though it's quite old. I still think that it's kind of interesting to watch. So this is a claymation version, and I will play it for you now. I think it's maybe 7. So let me play that, and then we can pretty much be done for today, I think.
We can stop for a quick drink. A pardoner, brimful of pardons, hot from Vatican inkwells. He finds himself poor and gullible congregations. They pay to escape hell's fire. He keeps the money.
Maybe I'll have a slice of cake as well.
Very much. I'd like to listen to something we can learn. I don't wish to hear anything uncouth.
Something moral.
Well, I'll just think up something couth while I...
I fear it may well be something unpleasant.
Whenever I preach, I always draw on the same text. The root of all evil is greed. I display my relics.
Oh, that's what they take them for?
A shoulder bone from one of Jacob's own sheep. The Jacob. It cures liver fluke in sheep, jealousy in humans. Use it in his soup and he'll never doubt his wife again. Even if he knows she's been blessed by a couple of vicars or 3.
Mummy,
But good men, good women, one word of warning. If there's anyone here in church this morning who's so sinful, then I'm not letting him offer up to my relics. No power, no grace. Anyone who's free of sin, come right up and offer. Who'll be first? Yeah. This little number's worth 100 smackers a year. Quiet, please. I'm about to begin. Please. Flanders, years ago. You know the sort of low-life type. Betting, brothels, beer.
God's body.
Bless God's body. And you should have heard their language. Last, the fruit of drunkenness. But King Herod, he got so plastered, he ordered up John the Baptist's head on a platter. All because of lust, Adam was cast out of paradise into...
On your toes, lad. Go see who's in the coffin.
An old friend of yours, sir. Sitting right there he was, and a creeping thief. Men call him Death, ran a blade to his heart. Left without a word.
Just a mile off. He's killed every man, woman, boy, serf. The village is his now. I'll find him. I'll go street by street. Let's swear an oath. Yeah, 3 brothers together till his death is dead. If we catch him, death is dead.
They went straight towards the village.
Where are you? Come on out, Dad. Jesus, he's going to die. Did you hear that? What is it? Where's it coming from? It's over there. No, it's over there. Who's this then?
Some old slave.
Let me in. Mother, when will my bones be at rest? Sissy, all nicely wrapped up, are we then? God keep you. What are you hanging round so long for? Death refuses to take my life. I walk the earth, knock at my mother's gate, but she denies me the grace. God, be
Not
with
so
you now.
fast. You must be death looking. Where is it?
I I left him over there, under the tree.
Come on then.
He'll be waiting. We'll have him now. Follow me.
Get this gold away from me and back to my house. What are you? We're going to have to shift it careful, clever like. Longest runs to town and nice and quiet brings us bread and wine. 2 of us guard the stash. Once it's dark, we get it out of here. Oh, thank you. I don't need to split it again. You know, mate, you can trust me like a brother. So if I suggested a way we could divide this little lot in half, would you say I was seeing you right?
No, we're watching the gold.
What would we say to it? Are we talking or what? Look, you've got to let me have some poison. Rats. I've got rats everywhere. And polecat eating my capons. Ducks. What's this? Ow.
There isn't a living thing that can swallow this. One tiny spoonful. And
Some bread. That's nice. Some of that. Lovely. That's lovely.
postcard. Stream later.
Oh, oh. Can you shut it?
Murder, blasphemy, wickedness, gluttony, lechery, gambling, greed. But dearly, dearly beloved, God forgives you your trespasses. For just gold or silver coinage, I also accept brooches, spoons, rings. You need only bow your head under this holy ball. Yes, yes, I'll take woolen goods. I just write your name here on my roll of honour, and your place is booked in the bliss of heaven. Here, why don't you start, mine host? Not expensive.
I'd rather kiss your bum. Fresh from the netty.
Now you're nuts. Now that's what I call a relic. I'd have them mounted in pig milk.
I agree to this silly game.
Temper. Oh, better not, Jack.
All right, so obviously that just depicts what we were already talking about, and I think I'm over time, so I'm just going to remind you that we do have class tomorrow, and tomorrow I will ask you if there's anything from the Canterbury Tales study guide that you want me to discuss. You can find that study guide here on the calendar, and it's also on the blackboard in the reading assignments. I highlighted them in green. So we'll also talk about discussion number 2. And if there are any questions that you have about that, we'll look at the question in a little more detail tomorrow as well. Usually Fridays, even if we have class, they're usually shorter periods. So that's what we will do tomorrow. Is there anything else for today that anybody wants to ask? All right, I hope that you all have a good day. I will see you tomorrow, and just make sure you look over that study guide. All right, bye.
Bye, Miss. Have a good day.
Bye, you too.